Millionaire's dark secret exposed, a Christmas mystery that will leave you speechless. A powerful millionaire lives a perfect life but hides a pain that cannot be overcome. He lost his beloved daughter, Esme, in a terrible accident on Christmas Eve. However, the truth is more terrible than he knows. Behind the tragedy is a plot by his second wife, Delilah, and her mother to seize all of his assets. The story reveals a father's emotional journey to find justice and family love. Follow along to discover how truth, justice and love triumph over evil. The city lights of Beverly Hills sparkled against the night sky, painting an illusion of perfection in California's wealthiest neighborhood. Inside a grand mansion, Henry Whitman, a millionaire known for his successful business empire, adjusted the cufflinks on his crisp navy blue suit. His 6-year-old daughter, Emily, twirled in her red velvet dress, her dark curls bouncing with each movement. Her laughter was a melody, filling the room with a warmth that Henry desperately clung to. "Do you think Mrs. Lopez will like my angel performance tonight, Daddy?" Emily asked, her wide brown eyes filled with hope and nervousness. Henry crouched down to her level, his smile warm but tinged with a sadness he tried to hide. "She's going to love it, sweetheart. You'll be the brightest star on that stage. Mommy would be so proud of you." Emily's smile lit up the room, but the mention of her late mother, Clara, hung heavily in the air. Clara had passed away during childbirth, leaving Henry to raise their daughter alone. Despite his immense wealth, the void Clara left could never be filled. The mansion buzzed with holiday preparations, but not everyone shared the same festive spirit. Upstairs, Vanessa, Henry's second wife, lounged on a plush chaise, scrolling through her phone with disinterest. Her red lips curled into a smirk as she typed a quick message to her mother, Agatha. "Are the papers ready?" Vanessa texted. Her mother's reply was instant. "All set. Once he signs, the estate is ours." Vanessa glanced at the clock. The plan was falling into place. Henry's love for Emily, his little angel, was his greatest strength, and his greatest weakness. Vanessa had spent months manipulating him, pretending to be the supportive wife while secretly plotting to take over his fortune. She never cared for Emily, seeing her only as an obstacle to her ambitions. The Whitman's sleek black car glided down the bustling streets, heading toward Emily's school for the Christmas performance. The festive cheer of Beverly Hills was palpable, with twinkling lights adorning every tree and carolers singing on street corners. Emily hummed along to the carol playing on the radio, her excitement contagious. But as they approached an intersection, a truck ran a red light, barreling toward them at terrifying speed. Henry barely had time to react. "Hold on, Emily," he shouted, swerving the car to avoid the collision. The sound of metal crunching against metal echoed through the street as their car flipped, rolling over multiple times before coming to a halt. Shattered glass and twisted steel surrounded them. Henry's vision blurred, his body pinned under the weight of the wreckage. Pain radiated through every inch of him, but his mind was fixated on one thing. "Emily," he croaked, his voice barely audible. "Emily, are you okay?" The faint sound of sirens approached, but Emily's small voice didn't answer. Henry's heart sank as darkness consumed him. Henry woke in a stark hospital room, the sterile scent of disinfectant invading his senses. His body felt heavy, every movement a struggle. A nurse stood by his side, adjusting the monitors that beeped rhythmically. "Where's my daughter?" Henry demanded, his voice hoarse and desperate. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, her face carefully arranged in an expression of sorrow. "Henry," she began, her voice trembling. "Emily, she didn't make it." The words hit Henry like a freight train. His body went cold, his chest constricting as he processed the unthinkable. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "She can't be gone. She was just here. She was singing." Vanessa placed a hand on his shoulder, feigning sympathy. "The doctors did everything they could. You have to be strong." Henry broke down, his sobs echoing through the room. Vanessa turned away, hiding the smirk that tugged at her lips. The plan was working perfectly. Weeks passed, and the once vibrant Whitman mansion became a hollow shell. Henry, consumed by grief, barely left his bed. The world outside continued to turn, but for him, time stood still. Vanessa took advantage of his vulnerability, placing document after document in front of him, which he signed without question. "It's just to help manage things while you recover," she cooed, her voice dripping with false concern. "You can trust me, Henry." Meanwhile, in a hidden corner of the city, Emily sat alone in a cold, dark room. Her red dress was torn and dirty, her once shiny curls now tangled. Agatha towered over her, her voice sharp and cruel. "Stop crying, you little brat. You're lucky we're keeping you alive." Emily hugged her knees, her tiny body trembling. She didn't understand why her father hadn't come for her. She didn't know that he believed she was dead. Every night, she whispered into the darkness, "Daddy, please find me." At the mansion, Vanessa basked in her newfound power, attending lavish parties and spending Henry's money freely. But her facade began to crack when Henry asked a simple question during dinner one evening. "Have you visited Emily's grave recently?" he asked, his voice hollow. Vanessa froze, her fork hovering midair. "Oh, yes. It's beautiful," she lied. Henry's gaze lingered on her, suspicion flickering in his tired eyes. Something about her answer didn't sit right, but his grief clouded his judgment. He shook the thought away, returning to his meal in silence. As Christmas approached, Henry found himself drawn to the memory of Emily's infectious joy during the holidays. Determined to honor her, he decided to donate gifts to children in need, disguising himself as a humble volunteer to avoid media attention. Dressed in simple, worn clothes, Henry loaded his car with toys and blankets. As he drove through the poorer neighborhoods, he felt a strange sense of purpose for the first time in weeks. At one stop, he spotted a small figure huddled near a tree, her frame barely visible under a tattered blanket. Something about her posture felt achingly familiar. He approached slowly, holding out a warm coat and a doll. "Hey there," he said softly. "I have something for you." The girl looked up, her face pale and dirty but unmistakable. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice shaking. Henry's heart stopped. "Emily." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she threw herself into his arms. "I knew you'd come for me," she sobbed. Henry clutched her tightly, his own tears falling freely. "I'm so sorry, baby. I didn't know. I didn't know." As they embraced under the dim streetlight, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The accident, Vanessa's lies, the forged documents, it was all a cruel scheme. Henry's grief transformed into determination. He wasn't just going to protect his daughter, he was going to make those who hurt her pay. The game had changed, and Henry was ready to fight. The soft hum of the car's engine accompanied Henry and Emily as they drove toward a safe house far from the mansion. Emily sat curled up in the passenger seat, her small hands clutching the doll Henry had given her moments before. Tears still streaked her face, but for the first time in weeks, her heart felt lighter. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling. I thought you'd forgotten me." Henry tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "Never," he said firmly, his voice thick with emotion. "I could never forget you, Emily. I didn't know. They made me think you were gone." Emily's small hand reached for his arm. "It wasn't your fault," she said softly, her big brown eyes looking up at him with a mix of love and trust. "It was her. Vanessa. And her mother. They were mean to me." Henry's jaw clenched, anger bubbling beneath the surface. He forced himself to remain calm, knowing Emily needed his strength more than his rage right now. "Tell me everything, sweetheart," he urged, his voice gentle. I need to know what happened. Emily hesitated, her tiny fingers playing with the hem of her dress. After the accident, she began, her voice shaky, I woke up in a strange house. It was dark and cold, and there was this lady. Vanessa's mom. She said you didn't want me anymore. That you didn't love me. Henry's heart broke at her words. That's not true, Emily, he said, his voice cracking. I love you more than anything in this world. They lied to you. Emily nodded, tears welling up again. I tried to tell myself they were lying, but it was so hard, Daddy. They made me do chores all day. I wasn't allowed to play or even cry. And when I ran away, I thought they'd find me and hurt me again. Henry pulled the car to the side of the road, unable to keep driving as the weight of her words crushed him. He turned to face her, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'm so sorry, Emily, he whispered, pulling her into a tight embrace. I promise you, they'll never hurt you again. Never. The safe house was a modest cabin nestled deep in the woods, far from the prying eyes of Vanessa and Agatha. Henry carried Emily inside, his arms wrapped protectively around her fragile frame. The warmth of the cabin and the faint scent of pine offered a stark contrast to the cold, cruel world they had just escaped. Emily settled onto the worn couch, her eyes darting around the room nervously. Are we safe here, Daddy? She asked, clutching her doll tightly. We're safe, Henry assured her, brushing a stray curl from her face. No one can find us here. But I need to make some calls, okay? I need to make sure Vanessa and her mother can't hurt anyone ever again. Emily nodded, her trust in her father unwavering. Okay. I'll wait right here. Henry stepped into the small kitchen, his phone already in hand. The first call was to his lawyer, a sharp and loyal man named Samuel Turner. Samuel, it's Henry, he said, his voice low and controlled. I need your help. Something terrible has happened. Henry, I've been trying to reach you for weeks, Samuel replied, concern lacing his tone. What's going on? They lied to me, Samuel, Henry said, his voice trembling with both anger and urgency. Vanessa and her mother, they faked Emily's death. They kept her captive, made her suffer, while they manipulated me into signing over control of my estate. There was a pause on the other end of the line before Samuel responded, his voice steely. Tell me everything. I'll get started on undoing whatever they've done. Henry recounted the events of the past weeks, sparing no detail. As he spoke, his resolve hardened. This wasn't just about reclaiming his wealth, it was about justice for Emily and ensuring that Vanessa and Agatha faced the full weight of the law. Back at the mansion, Vanessa paced the living room, her phone clutched tightly in her manicured hand. He's not answering, she hissed, throwing the phone onto the couch. Where could he have gone? Agatha, seated in an armchair with a glass of wine in hand, shrugged dismissively. He's probably sulking somewhere, thinking about that brat, she said, her tone dripping with disdain. He'll come crawling back. He always does. Vanessa wasn't so sure. Something felt off. Henry had been distant lately, his grief less consuming, as though he were starting to piece things together. And now, with his sudden disappearance. What if he knows? Vanessa whispered, her voice barely audible. Agatha scoffed. Knows what? That you're the only thing keeping his precious little empire together. Please, darling, stop worrying. You've got him wrapped around your finger. But Vanessa couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing in her chest. She had worked too hard to let it all fall apart now. Over the next few days, Henry worked tirelessly to gather evidence against Vanessa and Agatha. With Samuel's help, he uncovered forged documents, suspicious financial transactions, and even a trail of payments to a remote property, where Emily had been held captive. Emily, meanwhile, began to regain her spirit in the safety of the cabin. She played with her doll, helped Henry prepare simple meals, and even smiled more often. But the shadows of her trauma lingered, evident in the way she flinched at sudden noises or clung to Henry when the wind howled outside. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Emily looked up at her father. "Daddy," she said softly, "what's going to happen to Vanessa and her mom?" Henry hesitated, stroking her hair gently. "They're going to face the consequences of what they did," he said firmly. "People like them can't get away with hurting others." Emily nodded, her small hand reaching for his. "Do you think they'll ever say sorry?" Henry's chest tightened at her innocent question. "I don't know, sweetheart," he admitted. "But even if they don't, we're going to be okay. We have each other, and that's all that matters." The day of reckoning came sooner than Vanessa and Agatha expected. Henry returned to the mansion with Emily by his side, their presence a shock to the household staff who had believed the little girl was gone forever. "Mr. Whitman," one of the maids stammered, her eyes wide. "Emily, she's alive." Henry nodded, his expression grim. "She's alive. And everything's about to change." Vanessa was in the living room when Henry stormed in, Emily holding his hand tightly. She froze, her wine glass slipping from her fingers and shattering on the floor. "Henry," she began, her voice shaky. What is this?" "I thought. You thought you could steal my daughter, my fortune, and my life," Henry interrupted, his voice cold and filled with fury. "But your lies are over, Vanessa. It's time to face the truth." Emily glared at Vanessa from behind her father, her small frame trembling but her eyes blazing with defiance. "You said my daddy didn't love me," she said, her voice quivering with emotion. "But you were wrong. He found me. He saved me." Vanessa stumbled backward, her carefully constructed facade crumbling as Henry advanced on her. "You'll pay for what you've done," he growled. "Every tear my daughter shed, every moment of pain she endured, you'll pay for all of it." As the sound of sirens approached the mansion, Vanessa realized there was no escape. Henry had won, and justice was finally within reach. The piercing wail of police sirens echoed through the estate, their red and blue lights casting ominous shadows on the mansion's walls. Vanessa stood frozen, her usually confident demeanor shattered. Agatha rushed into the living room, her face pale as she took in the scene. "What's going on?" Agatha demanded, her voice shrill. Her eyes darted between Henry, Emily, and the approaching police cars visible through the grand windows. "What's going on?" Henry said, his voice a cold blade, "is justice. For Emily. For every lie you told. For every tear you made her cry." Agatha tried to speak, but her words faltered as two uniformed officers entered the mansion. Behind them was Samuel Turner, Henry's lawyer, carrying a stack of papers that looked like a physical manifestation of Vanessa and Agatha's crimes. "Mrs. Vanessa Whitman and Mrs. Agatha Cross," one of the officers announced, his tone professional but firm. "You are under arrest for fraud, child endangerment, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit theft." Vanessa's knees buckled, and she fell into a nearby chair. This is a mistake," she stammered, looking wildly at Henry. "Henry, you can't do this to me. I was your wife. I loved you." Henry's eyes burned with a fury that made Vanessa shrink back. "You don't know the meaning of love," he said, his voice low but trembling with anger. "You used me. You hurt my daughter. And now, you'll face the consequences." Agatha, on the other hand, wasn't ready to give up so easily. "This is preposterous," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You have no proof of anything. You're just trying to ruin us." Samuel stepped forward, placing the documents on the coffee table with a decisive thud. "Actually, we have more than enough proof," he said coolly. "These are forged death certificates, financial records showing the money you siphoned off, and testimony from the staff at the house where Emily was held." Agatha's defiance melted into panic as the officers stepped closer. Vanessa burst into tears, trying one last desperate plea. Please, Henry. Don't do this. We can fix this. Think of all the good times we had. Henry shook his head slowly. The only thing I'm thinking about is Emily, he said firmly. She deserves justice. As the officers cuffed Vanessa and Agatha, Emily clung to her father's leg. Her small voice broke the tension in the room. Are they going to jail, Daddy? Henry knelt down to her level, his eyes softening as he looked at her. Yes, sweetheart, he said gently. They're going to a place where they can't hurt anyone anymore. Emily nodded, her expression solemn. Good, she said quietly. They deserve it. The trial of Vanessa and Agatha became a media sensation. Every detail of their heinous plan was laid bare in court, from the fake funeral to the abuse Emily suffered in captivity. Witnesses testified, including staff members who had unwittingly played small roles in their scheme and now wanted to make amends. Emily, though young, bravely took the stand to share her story. Her words brought tears to the courtroom as she described the fear, loneliness, and pain she endured, and how her father's love gave her the courage to keep going. I knew my daddy would find me, she said, her voice trembling but determined. I never gave up because I knew he loved me. Henry sat in the front row, his hands clenched into fists as he listened to his daughter's testimony. He vowed silently to ensure she would never have to face anything like this again. The jury's decision was unanimous, guilty on all counts. Vanessa and Agatha were sentenced to 25 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 15 years. As they were led away in handcuffs, the courtroom erupted in murmurs of satisfaction. Justice had been served. Months passed, and life for Henry and Emily began to heal. The mansion, once a place of sorrow and manipulation, was transformed into a home filled with love and laughter. Emily's room, redecorated in her favorite colors, was a sanctuary of joy. The staff, many of whom felt guilty for not realizing what was happening, went out of their way to show Emily kindness and care. On a sunny afternoon, Henry and Emily stood in the garden, planting flowers together. Emily wore a wide-brimmed hat and gloves that were too big for her small hands. She giggled as she tried to dig a hole for a rose bush. Is this deep enough, Daddy? She asked, her cheeks smudged with dirt. Henry chuckled, kneeling beside her. Perfect, my little gardener, he said, patting her shoulder. You're doing great. Emily beamed, her smile lighting up the entire garden. This is the best garden ever, she declared. And when the roses bloom, they'll be as pretty as Mommy's favorite flowers. Henry's throat tightened at her words, but he smiled. She would have loved this, Emily, he said softly. She would have been so proud of you. That Christmas, the mansion was filled with warmth and joy. The tree sparkled with lights and ornaments, and the smell of cinnamon and freshly baked cookies wafted through the air. Henry and Emily invited the staff and their families to celebrate with them, turning what had once been a cold and formal household into a place of community and happiness. Emily wore a red dress that twirled when she spun around, her laughter echoing through the halls. Henry watched her with pride, his heart full. The pain of the past hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defined their lives. As they sat by the fireplace that evening, Emily curled up next to her father with a cup of hot chocolate. Daddy, she said, looking up at him with her big brown eyes, this is the happiest I've ever been. Henry kissed the top of her head, his voice filled with love. Me too, sweetheart, he said. Me too. Outside, snow began to fall softly, blanketing the world in white. Inside, the warmth of love and hope glowed brighter than ever. For Henry and Emily, this was the start of a new chapter, one filled with healing, happiness, and a promise to cherish every moment together. And as the clock struck midnight, Emily whispered, "Merry Christmas, Daddy." Henry smiled, pulling her close. "Merry Christmas, my little angel." The story of Henry and Emily is one of resilience, hope, and the power of love to overcome even the darkest moments. Despite the pain and betrayal they endured, their journey shows us that justice prevails and that, in the end, the truth always comes to light. Emily's unwavering belief in her father and Henry's relentless pursuit of justice remind us that love is the strongest bond of all. It can heal wounds, rebuild lives, and light the way to a brighter future. Vanessa and Agatha's downfall serves as a powerful lesson: greed and deception will always come at a cost. Their luxurious facade crumbled under the weight of their lies, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions. Their fate is a stark reminder that no amount of wealth or manipulation can shield one from justice. For Henry and Emily, their victory was not just about exposing the truth. It was about reclaiming their lives, their love, and their freedom. It was a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable pain, the human spirit can endure and triumph. Now, we want to hear from you. What do you think of Henry and Emily's journey? Do you believe in the power of love and justice to overcome adversity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to support our channel, Lavish Mysteries, where we bring you more inspiring stories like this one. Hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Your support motivates us to keep creating content that touches the heart and inspires change. If this story moved you, share it with someone who might need a little hope and inspiration today. Together, let's spread positivity and remind the world of the strength of love and justice. Thank you for joining us on this journey. See you in our next story on Lavish Mysteries.